This is Manal Sharif from Sydney and
Reinhard Sosen from Sydney as well in Tech for Evil headquarters.
This is season 3 of Tech for Evil, and we chose the name Don't Click Here, how human rights activists use technology to fight tyrants and how tyrants use technology to fight back. Stay with us today. Our episode is Flash Drives for Freedom. How can flash drives are used to free North Koreans? Our guest for this episode is Song-min.
So if you're like me and you have a drawer in your house full of USB sticks and you don't even remember what's on them, and you're kind of holding onto them thinking, well, maybe there's a good use for them, Manal and I have just the best thing you can do with these old USB sticks. Stay tuned. Today we're going to be talking to Seomi Lee, and we're going to be bringing up Yeonmi Park and looking at this dark country on planet Earth called North Korea and how your USB drive, your old USB drive, could be used to shine a light into the lives of some of the people that live on the darkest country on the planet, North Korea. Stay tuned.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You've been living in a dream world, Neo. A prison for your mind.
Salam everyone. My name is Manal Sharif. I'm a cybersecurity expert and I worked my whole career to protect people's data from hackers, the bad guys. I'm also a women's rights activist. I use social media successfully to start the Women to Drive movement back home in Saudi Arabia.
And I'm Reinhard Sosen. As a teacher, I saw how tech could light up a classroom, but there was a dark side that I've recently discovered. My friend Manal and I are on a podcasting journey to investigate the evils of big tech, educate people around the world, and inspire netizens just like you, young and old, towards a better digital future.
Hi everyone. This is the episode about one of the darkest country on planet Earth, a country where there's no internet freedom, there's no free access to information, a country that is ranked one of the last countries on the Global Freedom Index by Freedom House. We have our guest today, one of the Human Rights Foundation, and Min Lee, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right. He's the director of Korea Desk and Programs at Human Rights Foundation. And he's also the program lead for Flash Drives for Freedom. Something was very interesting, me and Reinhard, we saw when we were at Also Freedom Forum.
Hello. Yeah, hello.
Hi.
Hi, Mena. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yes, I'm Song-min Lee, and I'm the director of Korea Desk and Human Rights Foundation. Before starting, talking about our programs, would it be okay to talk about a little bit about my organization?
Yes, please. Can you tell us more about you, who you are, and when did you join Human Rights Foundation and became the director of Korea Desk and Programs?
Of course, yeah. Human Rights Foundation we are actually a non-partisan and non-profit organization that promotes protects human rights worldwide with a focus on closed societies such as China, Russia, North Korea, and Belarus, and more. So I was originally born and grew up in North Korea, but I was lucky to get out when I was 24. So there are a number of programs HRF actually operating worldwide to achieve its mission. Again, this is to preserve and promote human rights worldwide. Our Korea program-wise, in terms of our Korea program, we do have a program called Flash Drives for Freedom. This is a world-winning program and initiative organized by Human Rights Foundation and to get the external information into North Korea. We do this work in partnership with organizations mostly based here in South Korea. So it's related to Human Rights Foundation work also to a certain extent. It is very personal to me because as someone who was born there and is having lived through there in the land without any alternative source of information. So this is one of the programs we are working on currently, and I'm happy to talk about in other areas we work on as well.
So this is amazing. So, Song-min, are you talking to us from South Korea now?
Yes, that's correct. I'm currently based in South Korea.
And you mentioned that you're from North Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And when did you leave North Korea?
I left North Korea late 2009, and I came to South Korea in 2010.
How did you leave North Korea?
Well, yeah, leaving North Korea is not something like, you leave to any country in the rest of the world. You simply get a passport and get a visa, etc. But in the case of North Korea, it's different because that North Korean government doesn't allow its citizens to leave the country without the permission. So basically, most of the North Koreans, unless you have specifically authorized the permission, they never get the chance, never get to see the world for the entire of their life. So most North Koreans, like myself, when you leave the country, we have to escape. That is the only viable option. So I had to escape through the border across the river separating North Korea and China. And, as you know, the Chinese government doesn't accept North Koreans as refugees. So basically, I had to go through secretly travel across the Chinese mainland and to cross the border into another Southeast Asian country to ask for political asylum. So basically as refugees, right? So that's how I was able to leave the country.
You mentioned that you crossed a river from North Korea to mainland China. How many days was your escape journey all the way until you were able to apply for asylum for asylum,
So I think
political asylum? Yeah.
Yes, it took overall, it was about 2 months. It was a relatively shorter time compared to other North Korean defectors. I do have a number of fellow defectors Korean living here in South Korea. A lot of them actually took something like a number of years, up to sometimes like 10 years to get here, South Korea. But in the case of that, when I was crossing the border, I was lucky in a sense in that I lived in a border city just right next to China. So when I was living in North Korea, I also did a little bit cross-border business in cooperation with North Korean border guards, bringing commodities like cooking oil, cigarettes, candies, and rice, etc., to North Korea to sell them in North Korean markets and with added margin and things like that. So when I was leaving the country, I had friends in North Korean border guards. So they were able to help me out crossing the border. So, but of course, this is not a common case. Crossing the border is extremely risky.
Songmin, that sounds like you had a really harrowing escape from North Korea. Some of the people that listen to our podcast may not be fully aware of what's happening there inside the country. Seeing as you have first-hand experience and knowledge, can you tell our listeners a little bit about North Korea, the regime and the people? What's life like there, and why did you feel you had to escape?
Yeah, so it's a little bit about the context. Let me give your listeners a little bit of a context of North Korea. So this country has been ruled by a single hereditary-based dynastic and oppressive dictatorship that has been in power since 1948. And country is known to have no single free or fair elections, opposition parties, or independent media. So it's mostly the people. The country of 25 million population is isolated and disconnected from the rest of the world. And when you're born, like almost every North Korean, when they're born in North Korean system, they are kind of receiving a very carefully created propaganda education surrounded, of course, cult of personality. And we came to believe in the system, the North Korean leaders is almost infallible as like God-like figure. And this is all the school systems and society organization activities surrounded around that personality, cult of personality. So, but I think that one of the most important turning points, personally, and as well as for many North Koreans, was 1990s with the famine. North Korea went through the Great Famine just right after around between 1995 and 1998 for 34 years. Of course, there was multiple reasons why that famine took place. It was after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and also North Korea's ineffective economic policy and natural disaster. So all those things, combined factors, brought upon North Korea a devastating famine. So now the people at that point, starting that point, they began realizing there was something wrong in North Korean society. In North Korea, every North Korean citizen learns that North Korea is the greatest socialist paradise on this planet, and North Korean leaders are the greatest leaders in the world. So, and we also learned that the rest of the world has a really gloomy and dark and oppressive place. While North Korea is the best place to live. But again, as the system also began dysfunctioning in the aftermath of the famine, and we began, receiving some informations trickling from other countries such as China and Russia, and we were shocked. We were shocked because saw the movies, for instance, produced in South Korea, and they were portraying the life, the people, in South Korea, like normal average citizens' lives. But that kind of things was completely unimaginable for us because in school system and throughout the North Korean society, we are taught to believe that South Korea is gloomy and dark and, rife with the hungry people and homeless people, etc. But the things we saw through those contents were completely different reality. So I think that, this and other related factors, many people decided to cross the border. Of course, some of them crossed the border for food and others are crossed the border for freedom. But yeah, that's where we are now. So today there are over 34,000 North Koreans formally, officially resettled here in South Korea. But again, that survey is not easy. A lot of people get caught in the middle of this survey and repatriated back to North Korea and face a heavy punishment, unfortunately.
So Sungmin, it sounds like there's a great cloud hanging over North Korea and a big lie that's being told and perpetuated by the government. You mentioned in your story that you were able in the beginning phases after that famine to see information trickling through from other countries. And how was some of that information coming through? Was it on the radio, television, newspapers? How was that little bit of information that North Koreans were getting? How was that happening?
Yes, there could be multiple sources of the channels through which those informations come through. One is a shortwave radio. The people inside North Korea do have that unauthorized possession of shortwave radios.
So it's illegal to have shortwave radios.
It's not legal.
Wow,
it's not legal. So anyone is identified with a kind of mini unfixed radio device could be really in serious trouble.
Shortwave radios are something we take for granted here, and anyone can pretty much own one. So yeah, that's quite a big difference. Besides shortwave radio, what was another way that people got information?
So people also were able to access information through DVDs and CDs. So a lot of those
movies and music.
Yes, and movies and musics, and also especially content produced in South Korea was popular. The reason is because North Korea and South Korea, they speak the same language and share the same culture. So from historical perspective, so they were able to better understand the content and relate to that. So a lot of those contents actually are being smuggled by, of course, smugglers and also traders, the business people, coming from China, etc. Yes, there was some of those sources. Yeah.
So information is smuggled. So people smuggle drugs to other countries, but in North Korea, information is smuggled. Can you explain to us what type of information? Is it like the news, movies, music? What type of information people smuggle to North Korea?
Yeah. Yes. So it could be really broad. The reason is because, to understand this one, I think this question, I think we need to take a look at a little broad landscape of North Korean, society. So when you go to North Korea today, it's essentially you see only state-run TV broadcast and state-run radio system, radio broadcast system. And there is some very limited the intranet. Of course, that is only allowed to the people, internally who have access to, have some access there. So all the information you see and watch and hear are produced and approved content. As I already noted in my introduction, there is no single independent media. So therefore, it's really any information, whether it's related to market, exchange rate, or what's really happening in the rest of the world, South Korea and Japan and China, because all the information you see through the newspapers, media, tightly controlled by North Korean regime. So there is any messages that goes against the interest of the regime, it doesn't get published there. So informations like international news, what's going on, for instance, in Ukraine today, why that the war took place, for instance, the background stories, and also exchange rate, the economy, market prospects, and also how defectors are currently living in South Korea. Also simply showing that political campaigns, elections, presidential speech here in taking place in South Korea, all these kind of types of information are novel. And it could be really extremely interesting content for those Koreans to educate themselves and to learn about the outside world.
Can I ask, what was the first piece of information that was smuggled that you were exposed to?
I watched a number of North Korean movies. When I was in high school in North Korea, I was a student then back then. And there was the movie that was actually a serialized drama and called Winter Sonata. There was really, back then, was a super popular drama here in South Korea. And then there was smuggled into North Korea through someone. I had no idea back then. But when I watched that drama, how can I describe it at the moment? I was just in disbelief. The reason is because, in North Korea, we learn a great deal about South Korea, country as a poor country and rampant by American imperialists and trampled by them and full of hungry people, etc. And also we are taught to believe that we need to unify and bring those poor people to the bosom of great leader Kim Jong-il. Back then, he was alive. And so that was such a limited understanding about South Korea. But when I watched that drama, I was really shocked. And in the movie, you see, number of high skyscrapers and people sipping coffee at coffee shop and fashionably dressed people. And also, full of electric lights and full of cars in the street. All the things we had never been told to learn about, to know about. And so,
must have looked like a different world.
Yeah, it was like it's kind of alternative reality, different universe I was seeing there. So, yeah.
So, Songmin, why didn't you think, two things, what would happen to you if you were caught watching it? And the second thing, why didn't you think at that time it's just a propaganda from South Korea? Why did you trust that thing is real, is not just acting?
Yeah, so I think that in a number of years of brainwashing to which I was a subject to, of course, that when I saw it, I didn't immediately believe it, and my psychological reaction was like I just was so confused. And then I also thought about whether this content was produced by enemy country, South Korea, to destroy socialist system or to corrupt the minds of North Koreans, as the government has always said to us. But it's like I was very scared to watch it, to be honest. But also you have back in the mind, you have a curiosity. What kind of world actually they want to present, whether they are propaganda or not. So, and as you're watching through it, I was increasingly, was into the content. The reason is because when you watch a South Korean drama, they do not necessarily, present or beautify the image or idealize the image. It's not. The content was describing average life, average life of average citizens. There is love and breakup, and there is sad story, and there is issues with political system in South Korea, all things like that. They're presenting it not necessarily, in a way that they look down to North Korean system, why they're giving, the better image to its society. It's not. So in a lot of aspects, I could relate to. So that's how, it was a starting point.
Songmin, I'm hearing in your voice a real despair that's inside North Korea. Cloud of a lie, and when this little bit of an information from the outside world, this what was it called, the program Winter Sonata, when this program Winter Sonata, when you saw it and it lit up your world, this had a big impact on you, and I imagine for many other people in North Korea as well who have been fortunate enough to escape. You have what I think is probably one of the most interesting and intriguing jobs on the face of the planet, because you get to be the program lead for something called Flash Drives for Freedom. And if you don't mind, let's change pace a little bit and talk about your role with Flash Drives for Freedom. Now that we've set up a bit of context for our listeners about what it's like in North Korea, how you escaped, the terrible regime that's there, and the important role that information plays, smuggling information inside to North Korea, the important role that plays for freeing the minds of one of the most darkest countries on the planet. Can you tell us? To me, it sounds almost like a James Bond episode where I can send my USB flash stick to some post office box in New York, and that address in New York can take my USB stick and actually affect change in a country on the other side of the planet. When Manal and I were talking, we thought we have to ask you, who came up with this idea? How did it start? And tell us a little bit more about how you became to be involved in Flash Drives for Freedom.
Yes. The Flash Drives for Freedom program is a really iconic and also important program for Human Rights Foundations, the Korea program. The Human Rights Foundation has a long history empowering North Korean defectors, activists, and CSOs, civil society organizations, to bring about this change in North Korea. Really the world most across the ISO society. So before I joined the program, the organization leadership recognized early on the importance of increasing information access in North Korea. They, for instance, organized the world's first North Korean hackathon in 2014, aimed at bringing more information to North Korea by connecting, for instance, activists with Silicon Valley-based technologists. And the outcome of this conference was this Flash Drives for Freedom program. So next year, that was 2016, this program was officially launched. And since then, the program has been working, and we're still working with defector organizations and activists here in Korea. And we have been sending over now, since the program was launched, we have sent over 130,000 flash drives to North Korea. The contents, we are including the contents of the Korean Wikipedias, documentaries, and the general knowledge, and also information on entrepreneurship and the defectors' life here in South Korea as well. So, program has been extremely impactful. We hear that feedback of consumers, if we describe North Korea as consumers, essentially, in a sense, we hear these voices and feedback to activists, and they require and ask for a certain type of information, and there is a feedback system between activists and the North Koreans inside North Korea. So we continue, curating, identifying those informations in collaboration with defectors.
That's extraordinary. So let's connect the dots a little bit for our listeners. We have you and your program, Flash Drives for Freedom. People can send their old USB sticks to this address in New York, and then you can upload really helpful information that you can smuggle inside North Korea. And some part of me, Songmin, has to ask, why? Why do you have to go to such extraordinary lengths to get information inside North Korea? So let me ask you a question, Songmin. If I was inside North Korea right now and I wanted to send an email, would I be able to do that? And what would it look like?
So, it'll be wonderful if you are able to send the email to someone inside North Korea directly. In my understanding, there is some formal channels to do that. For instance, the North Korean diplomat presence in United Nations in New York, and also some government-run trading agencies have email address. But
that sounds controlled by the government.
Absolutely. When they send the message, usually that doesn't get to the recipient directly, but security agencies tightly control and read. So if you're talking about the average citizens sending any communication message to every single person, there is no way, none.
Right.
Because,
So let's try
no
something.
internet.
Let's try something easier. How about a text message? Would I be able to send a text message if I was in North Korea right now? Would I be able to send a text message outside to a relative in South Korea, for example?
If you're talking about that, North Korea sanctioned the cell phones, domestic mobile phone system, there is no way to send information or text message to anywhere outside North Korea. Having said that, there is a very small number of activists. Usually we might call it either underground citizen reporters or defector families. They are living along the border with China. They are using that Chinese cell phone. Of course, that is illegal. If you are caught with those cell phones, you will face a heavy punishment. So those are individuals, very small number of individuals. They keep it secretly, but of course, you cannot just turn on the cell phone 24/7 because that the regime uses detection, radio detection devices, etc. So they tend to turn off within 5 minutes or sometimes like 2-3 minutes after just communicating very essential message only. So that's very small channel, tiny hole we currently have to communicate with North Koreans.
So sending an email is restricted to only the elite people. To try and send a text message, it sounds it's very risky and only available to some very brave people. What about if I wanted to see a website? If I was in North Korea today, would I be able to turn on my laptop and see a website?
Unfortunately, no. For the average citizen, there is no way to connect the internet. And it's safe to assume that if you ask every North Korean, they would have no idea whatsoever what Google is, what Facebook or Twitter is. They have no idea whatsoever because they never heard about it. Based on some the scholarly analysis, I saw that a few state-run institutions, they do have internet connection for academic research purposes only. But I heard about that even those institutions, the individuals steps in those institutions cannot access that system freely. You have to report it, you have to get a permission, and you have to identify what kind of search word you're going to using. And so, searching for other, the phrases and other topics is extremely dangerous in North Korea.
So technology that we here in Australia take for granted, like email, texting, phone calls, the internet, these things are not in North Korea. There's a total blackout in North Korea of information, and it sounds like these people are imprisoned in their own homeland. While we were researching this, Songmin, Manal and I went to the freedomhouse.org webpage, and Manal was having a look inside that webpage just to see a few different scores. This is obviously an organization that ranks countries in various ways across different dimensions. There's a democracy score, global freedom score. And Manal told me, hey, Reinhardt, click on the Internet Freedom Score and see if you can see anything funny about that. And when I clicked on it, we went down the list and we can't even see North Korea anywhere on the list for the Internet Freedom Score. And we're guessing that's because the internet doesn't really even exist in North Korea. So thanks for answering those questions of mine. I obviously knew the answers, but I wanted people to hear from you and your voice about just how much of a blackout there is inside North Korea for the people there, the average everyday citizens, not being able to send an email, text, or look at it.
And if I can add, it's funny because if you look at the global freedom scores, and again, it's on freedomhouse.org, North Korea is in the total score from 100 on global freedom score. They score 3. Countries that on the same level are Eritrea, Eastern Donbass. Less than that, which is Turkmenistan, South Sudan, Syria, and Tibet. Saudi Arabia scores 8. That's my country. I'm thankful I live in Australia. Australia scores 95 out of 100 on the global freedom score. So it is, I think people living in democracies cannot even understand or comprehend when you live under censorship. The problem in Saudi Arabia, we have free internet. People have access to internet, so it's not censored by the government. When I was in Saudi Arabia, I could use social media. I could use the internet. I could access anything I want. I could use VPN. The problem is when Saudi Arabia create now that we don't have information bubble, we have echo chamber in Saudi Arabia. And echo chamber means that even when we read information coming from other countries, we don't believe it. We don't trust them. They are the enemy. They are conspiring to bring down. They hate us. They only want our oil. And that's why we don't believe it. So we live in an echo chamber where we don't trust information coming from outside. And I think it's important for people to understand that even countries with free access to information, like Saudi Arabia, people still live in a way where they self-censor. They read something and they disbelieve it. So it's interesting because you have two problems. The first problem, overcoming the censorship in North Korea. And the second problem is, will people believe what they read and see? What do you think, Sungmin?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, and I think that of course there are state controls exist to varying degrees in a number of countries around the world today. But based on number of the scholarly researches and also based on my experiences as well, it's really the complete restrictions we see in North Korea is really. It's harder to find anywhere in the world today. But in terms of the information, how to, what would be the people's reaction? You talked about echo chamber effect, and when people saying the same message and reflecting back to each other, they tend to be a little bit more. So I think that is also applicable in North Korean society as well. The reason is because, as I already noted, that in North Korea, so from the moment you are born, essentially you are subject to the brainwashing. So each North Korean household has the leader's portrait in their household, and when you go to kindergarten, you are singing the glorifying the songs glorifying the Kim family, and also learning those propaganda materials throughout your education in North Korea. So, and without alternative sources of information, it's like people are, they're desensitized to. Sometimes like they could, harder to accept it. For instance, when I was living there, when we see the public educations, sometimes teachers would organize the whole classroom to guide us to our public execution site. We see some people publicly executed without even trials. But that was really hard to accept, hard to believe it. Things happening in the so-called the world's the best paradise country. But as we tend to see more and more often, it's kind of desensitized to seeing that kind of. At a certain point, you begin to accept as a kind of, as a part of your normal life. So information is the same as you constantly consume, subject to that kind of state manipulated propaganda. It's really sometimes it's a question when you see that cultural materials that are describing South Korea as a thriving society, and also life is a really comfort, and also people's abundant electricity, all kind of things we never heard about. So that's why a lot of people are not to believe it. But again, I think that's the reason why programs such as Flash Drives for Freedom and similar work by nonprofit organizations and activists, those trying to send information into North Korea, is such important. So it's important because as more North Koreans have alternate sources of information, there will be a greater chance for them to think about their society, the society they live in relation to the outside world. So yeah, so a lot of the aspects to think about, but again, that it's really hard. In North Korean, the question is really one of the most difficult topics and challenges to address because of the complete isolation, nearly complete state control. But yeah, the efforts like this through USB drives, we are sending, and also radio broadcast systems through which activists trying to send the message. And also, I'm aware that some organizations' efforts trying to contact the North Korean workers dispatched abroad to make the money for the regime. They're basically slave labor workers. So there are some multiple efforts going on. But of course, this is a challenging issue to address.
This is Manal Al-Sharif and Reinhard Sosin from Tick for Evil podcast. Our guest for the day is Sungmin Lee, the director for Flash Drives for Freedom from Human Rights Foundation. We'll see you after the break. Wired magazine called it's literally a key that will unlock a new world for North Koreans. We're here in the studio with our guest of the day, Sung-Min Lee from North Korea. And he's the director of Flash Drives for Freedom from Human Rights Foundation. I have with me Reinhard Sosen too.
Thank you, Mia. And I have a pencil case full of old USB flash drives here that I'm definitely going to be sending in to Flash Drives for Freedom. It's a
You have to check
phenomenal-
them first. Don't
I will
have pictures
I
with
will
your
definitely
with your
format
shorts.
definitely format all my USB drives before sending them in. Thanks for the tip, Mia. And
Thank you for your support, and I'll send you the information how to get involved. And
one thing I wanted to read was directly from your website, Songmin. It says the North Korean government strictly prohibits access to foreign information and media, and individuals found in possession of this material do face severe punishment. However, access to foreign information in North Korea has grown significantly in the last 20 years, and I'm guessing that's got a lot to do with Flash Drives for Freedom as well, and it is a valued and coveted commodity. In addition, Human Rights Foundation believes that access to information is a fundamental right, not a privilege. One thing that I wanted to ask you based on that, given that the information inside North Korea is growing and the light on the outside world is starting to be shone, would you say that you are slowly helping to win the battle for information inside North Korea?
yes, that's a really good question. I do believe that the program that the Flash Drives for Freedom specifically, the impact it has created on the ground for helping North Koreans understand the world has been really helpful, has been impactful. And we, as I already noted, that we have delivered over 130,000 flash drives as of now. And by some indication, we did actually some field research with our field partners to measure how each drive actually, how many people actually get to see certain content per drive. So based on their estimates, one drive reaches 10 North Koreans on average. Because once you send the flash drive to individual in North Korea, that person shares that drive with his siblings, with his mom and his relatives. So that is how that number of 10 came about. So we have, that of course there is some challenges to measure how many people actually get to the content through the program. The reason is because in North Korea it's not kind of environment where we conduct a survey publicly, let alone even asking people whether they watched or not, because it's very dangerous. But we do know that in recent years, 2018, that the North Korean dictator, Kim Jong-un, called those information content coming from outside the country as a quote-unquote vicious cancer, corrupting the minds of North Korean young people. So we have seen the multiple reactions on the part of the North Korean regime. They enacted a law, so-called anti-reactionary third law. Essentially, what they are trying to do is that to crush all the external informations the people get to access. They call it anti-socialist behavior, unsocialist, like the behavior, the hair color, or even wearing jeans. There is multiple categories they are talking about. So yes, it's the regime is reacting to that. But
So wearing jeans and coloring your hair for a North Korean is now an illegal antisocial behavior, is it?
Mm-hmm. So
Wow.
it could be anything really. In jeans is a symbol of Americans, right? So
Yes.
that the reason is they are prohibited, and dyeing hair color, for instance, is a slightly yellow or brown, or even like in students, school kids have like a little longer hair, like kind of similar hairstyle you see in South Korea, like K-pop. You see, the BTS, like singers, those hairstyles. So people trying to emulate it, kids trying to emulate it because they watched such a content in North Korea. So the regime now is attempts trying to prevent it, but that is in estimate that the regime is doing the late better. It's too late to control this situation.
So even though they've tried everything in their power to limit information coming in, they cannot stop the wave. We had a technical question for you, Sungmin. Mia was asking me earlier, do you expect that there might be some prohibitions on USB ports on laptops or computers? Is everyone that has a computer able to use their USB port freely in North Korea, or are there some sort of blocks that the government has put in place, some sort of technical lock on the USB ports?
Yeah, that's a good question. As of now, we haven't seen any attempt to block out the USB, that the outlets in particular. But we have seen that the regime has allowed, the use of laptops and computers in some limited numbers, limited capacity in North Korea. For instance, public institutions and academic institutions, government, the regime has encouraged to use those systems. But interestingly, the North Korean the operating systems that is not normally the kind of system that we are seeing here, like the Mac or Windows, we normally operate or other programs. They actually have developed their own version, like a Red Star, or also any computers and devices, whether cell phone or computer, laptop, tablet, they all have to be registered with the government in charge of those devices. So they are just like when they go to the institution, for instance, they'll check the brand of that device and then they disable. No, excuse me, let me put it that again. They update the program, that indigenously developed program, which of course doesn't accept the unauthorized app installation and the contents play. However, there are a very small number there has been now the small number of people who are actually illegally possessing the laptops, like second-hand devices smuggled from China. So they are able to use USB drives and to access content. But in terms of, I think we need to a little bit differentiate whether they are, criminalizing the use of USB devices or, versus the contents, the types of contents loaded on USB devices. So in terms of USB devices, it's not illegal because for instance, the state-sanctioned laptops, they're still using USB devices, right? But the content is illegal. So I think that's why I think North Koreans very sensitive, and they prefer to have the smaller memory devices over the bigger devices such as a CD or or the hard drive memory devices, because it's easier to hide. And sometimes they get stopped by police on the street, and the police demand to see that what kind of content on the drive. So so that kind of things like catch and mouse games going on.
It's amazing that, Reinhard, we don't even use USB drives or CDs or DVDs anymore here in Australia. Everything is streaming on the cloud. Songmin, interesting thing, living in a democracy, we see, for example, here in Australia, a few companies own the media. And it's like a monopoly, and they control exactly what's important. The editor-in-chief, they are the one who control what the masses will have to know or what's important based on these two companies in Australia that bought and killed local news agencies and local newspapers. And the other thing is, it's just amazing how the avalanche with information we get from social media today and from the internet desensitize people to look for the truth. So they look for the easy way. They listen to this news channel or they read this newspaper. They will always read this newspaper. It's just so funny because we are on the other extreme, which we have free access to information, but this information is controlled by two monopolies, and they're the one. So it takes an effort for us to go and look for independent media and to go and look for the truth. Not everyone is willing to do that, unfortunately. And we're facing this now in Australia with The Voice, with two campaigns, the No and Yes, for the rights for Aborigines to have a voice in the Constitution. What do you think, living in a democracy with free access to information, does this change how people know their rights, know their freedoms, or it makes people it's overwhelmed with the amount of information we have access to? And this is the other opposite of the extreme case of North Korea. So now you're living in a democracy. How do you have access to information that you can rely on, and it's not biased and it's not propaganda and it's true? Now you have this freedom. What are you doing with it?
Yeah, it's a really tough question to answer. I think that is one of the most difficult challenges we are facing as a citizen living in a democratic society. And we are talking about that, attention deficiency increasingly in digitized world. As you noted, that there are so many number of sources of information trying to get our attention, basically. So I was actually, I also finished my study in America, and while living in America, I was also surprised as well. So, for instance, in America, you see, those, people who are in the conservative spectrum, they tend to see the Fox News, right? So, whereas the people who are in the liberal and progressive category tend to, listen to watching the content on CNN, so, and etc. So, I also noticed that people they choose what kind of content to consume and what kind of information they believe in. So I think that it seems there is, some a little bit of the concerning aspect in terms of those, multiple sources talking about in different, assets of a single issue, and how do you believe, how can you believe that which one is true, and which one is is an objective evaluation. So I think that that's something I'm still struggling with as someone who was born and grew up in North Korea. I'm honestly is really still overwhelmed. I'm in the process of dealing with in a modern digitalized world. So yeah, so it's kind of while you're trying to deal with this kind of reality I'm living in, I'm also thankful. The reason is because when we see the situations, the social and political issues taking places, and at least we do have here in democratic societies, have opportunities and have the resources, and basically it's done by your choice. It's not by the state, blocking you out from accessing those informations. Though, to a certain degree, there is some of the controls in other societies, but by and large, you are basically living in an open society. So in that regard, I think that this is the freedom you have and the freedom we cherish, I do believe, because I'm thinking about the North Koreans that, as I noted, that from the moment they're born and until they die, they never get to know any other voices besides that very carefully created North Korean regime's propaganda. They know a lot of people are dying. Their society is the best and or insufficient or knowing nothing at all about the outside world. That kind of sad society they're living in. So it's really hard. I sometimes think that when North Korean society it becomes more open, and North Koreans get to see all those alternative sources of information, it is also something to think about as a North Korean defector and as a international community, how North Koreans would react to, deal with those, overwhelming sources of information. So I think that's something I'm still, I'm still struggling to understand how we could deal with. But at least the information sources, civil society organizations such as HRF are trying to provide plays very positive role. The reason is because we are trying to provide the alternative sources of information. For instance, when North Korean regime describes that Korean War as something that was initiated by American imperialist and puppet South Korean government, and North Korea was innocently attacked, and they won their victorious Korean War, etc. That is their own propaganda. But in reality, we know that based on the informations from the Soviet archive and other former communist countries like East Germany, we know that is not true. The war was actually initiated by North Korean dictator Kim Il-sung, and they brought about massive destruction to entire the Korean people. So that kind of information, objective based on truth, and also based on the informations requested and selected by North Koreans themselves, I think it's such an important. So I think when you are doing this kind of information curation and sending North Koreans, that's one of the reasons why we work with defector organizations, and that's the reason why we are not the one who selects the information, but North Koreans are themselves who selected information for themselves.
You've been listening to Tech for Evil. We've been chatting with Song-min Lee, who's in South Korea at the moment, and he is the program lead for Flash Drives for Freedom. Song-min, in your answer there, I heard a lot of gratitude for open and free societies that we have. And while they may not be perfect, they are at least full of resources and information that people can select. And we need to be wise about selecting and choosing. And we do have a larger menu of options here in our country in Australia, and obviously where you are in South Korea. We're very grateful to you for talking to us today. On another note, if you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking you'd love to get involved with Flash Drives for Freedom, the organization helping to smuggle your old USB drive into North Korea with invaluable information to North Korean people, then you can do that by going to flashdrivesforfreedom.org, and you can donate USB drives. And I see now also, Song-min, that you're accepting SD cards and micro SD cards of 16 gigabytes or more, which is great. Send your USB stick to the address in New York, and Flash Drives for Freedom will take care of the rest. Song-min Lee, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you and getting your insight on Tech for Evil with Manal and I, and we wish you all the best. If there was a parting word you can leave for our audience about anything they can do or how to get involved or anything new coming up for Flash Drives for Freedom as an organization, now's your time to say it.
Thank you, Mena, commenting that. Yes, for those who are interested in getting involved and learn about the program, a little more about the program, of course, you could visit flashDrivesforFreedom.org. And also, we do have some information. If you are interested in the organizing a drive collection program or campaign at your school, we have also instructions on how to create the campaign and make it successful. And also, if you need any help, of course, please feel free to contact me anytime. We have, of course, all contact information displayed on our program website as well. Thank you so much.
They also have some fantastic merchandise. Actually, I'm just noticing they have some fantastic merchandise, T-shirts and posters as well, with your hilarious logo that I absolutely love. So that's another way that our listeners can support Flash Drives for Freedom. Go on, Manal.
Oh, no, just cybersecurity. We tell people if you find a flash drive on the floor, never plug it in your computer. So
yes.
This is the first time I'll tell the audience that if... Disclaimer, if you find a flash drive, don't plug it in your computer unless you're North Korean, living in North Korea. Thank you, everyone, and have a beautiful day.
Thanks, Song-min.